that right?
Yeah.
I can.
Spookab.
Hmm?
Spookab, what's that say?
Spookab.
Lestistic? Well, Gary, you're here fashionably early.
Oh my.
Ooh.
What happened? You okay?
I'm just a figment of my own imagination.
Yeah.
You might need to cut off on the tuna, if you know what I mean.
Wow. Yeah, I've seen cats that look like they could sit up like that stable.
It's my mission to see every cat on the internet.
So, what do you think of the post of the week?
Oh,
I mean,
the super cat?
the super cat. That is
I think
the
that little girl, I think it's a girl, I think that little girl has given that cat a few treats, if you know what I mean.
Oh, that was a little boy, I think.
Okay, little boy, little girl, it was a distance behind the tree.
Mm-hmm.
Was it a boy cat or a girl cat?
The girl cat and a human boy.
So apparently this cat has gotten some good treats. That's what I'm taking away from it.
I think they just developed a relationship. They said in the interview that sometimes the boy picks the cat up very vigorously, and yeah, that is quite an expression there. Mm-hmm. It looks like it's photoshopped.
Oh my.
Uh-huh. That looks photoshopped.
This is how I keep saying,
I think y'all are missing what will really be the interesting background story here is, what about the dog, you know? I mean, how's he gonna live this down in the neighborhood, you know? I mean, all the other dogs in the neighborhood make fun of him.
if you get a human, if a dog bites a human.
He's not going to let it down.
For example, where I live, where I used to live, if a dog bites a human, the dog goes bye-bye.
Yeah, it's a capital offense. There's talk about
Yeah, where was that
rehabilitation.
event? Where was the posted event? What's
The one we're talking about?
Yeah,
It was
California.
in California. So they say there is a very, very slight possibility of rehabilitation, but it's very expensive and time consuming. And I want to hear what the dog whisperer has to say about it.
Yeah, but this dog's reputation in the neighborhood amongst the other dogs, it's not trash. I mean, he got beat up by a cat, you know, I mean, you know, he's gonna get no respect.
Getting caught on video. Lee, have you seen the viral video of the week?
No.
You will.
Yeah, there's one day left this week, so.
It's about a cat.
Oh, the cat attacking the dogs?
Uh-huh.
That was on the news.
Yeah. Well, we asked if you'd seen it. And you said,
Well, I didn't see it, a viral video, I saw the news.
oh, sure. It's newsworthy, yeah. I watched the Today Show online.
So, well, everybody, I am recording right now, so don't talk bad about your mom.
Oh, too late.
So, and I'm not gonna rush it along because I think we still have some people. It's not that nice outside, so they can't be outside sunning themselves. Anyone do anything fun today?
Watch cat videos.
Cat videos?
A specific cat video.
My favorite stress relief is watching bunnies eat things.
Mm-hmm.
It just calms me right down.
If it's not in your vegetable basket.
So
I put my boiler controls back together.
in the category of stress relief, a friend of mine gave me this in the dead of winter. It is the urban survival guide of bushcraft.
Mm-hmm.
There are some. The subtitle is "How to Predict the Weather with a Cup of Coffee." But it is all the cool, geeky, neat, science guy stuff that you can do with office equipment.
Ooh.
From shooting rubber bands to things to do with unbent paper clips and how to cook in tin foil on your car engine and other stuff.
So
like
it's
that. Matthew Cole, if you really need to relieve some stress.
So what you're saying here is we got some MacGyver, some Office Space, and
Yes.
maybe some Top Gear. So how many of you guys enjoyed the Oatmeal's latest drive. Familiar with the Oatmeal?
Did I get it from you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Matthew Herman, mathematician, he does the Oatmeal cartoons. They're kind of funny. And he's the guy that did the drive for the
Tesla.
buying Tesla's old building in New York. And he just made a campaign to get the land turned into a museum. And he asked Elon Musk for $8 million, and Elon Musk said yes.
Sure. Why not?
The internet is awesome.
And I know I'm probably going to be made fun of for asking this question, but who is Elon Musk and why does she have this pocket change?
He has this company called SpaceX and another company called Tesla.
Oh.
He also had this company you might have heard of called PayPal.
I thought you said Elon Musk, and I'm like, okay.
That's his name, E-L-O-N.
Elon.
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 Elon was
That's
his
a South
mother,
American
maybe.
It's a South American pronunciation
Yeah.
for you.
Somebody was making fun of me for my pronunciation, and I wrote out a whole bunch of Spanish names, and I go, pronounce those.
They have trouble pronouncing my name, you know. People back home have trouble pronouncing my
Oh,
name.
two Y's?
Ellis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But usually it came out Alex.
Yeah, I wouldn't even try to pronounce it right now.
Okay.
No, for example, the word for call
Oh, yeah.
starts with two L's.
Mhm.
And it's just like,
My dad would talk about kids having trouble pronouncing yellow.
mm-hmm.
They could say yellow, but they couldn't say yellow.
Correct. Yellow's ice.
Right. But my dad said just try to get them, you know, if they could say yellow, they could change it just a little bit to make it yellow. It always comes out jello. Why is it jello?
Because there's always room for Jello.
So, yeah, so for example, you have your J as your Huda,
Mm-hmm.
and then whenever they try to do the H
Mhm.
for, you know, basically trying to do it in English,
Mhm.
they really can't say H
Mhm.
and then something else. So.
Right. It's usually silent. So, hello.
So other nerdy things going on today. Linus was pleading for everybody to learn Linux.
Learn.
I don't know if it was satire or not, but it was. You gotta go check it out. When I was writing this up, 20 minutes ago, I did hit GitHub out of curiosity. A search for the term backup on GitHub. Come on, take a guess on how many hits.
10,000.
Did you read it already?
No.
Okay.
Just a wild guess.
Good. I mean, it was like 10,950.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
So sometimes I pull them out pretty accurate.
Mhm.
Sometimes I pull one out pretty accurate.
So pretty vague term. Anyone break anything today? Anyone fix anything today?
Fix my garage door.
Fix your garage door? Was it like off the rail or
Oh, you
just
did?
the thing not
What'd you
working?
do?
It was creeping.
Instead of going fast.
Right, instead of going fast. Unplugged it, plugged it back in.
Oh, just to reset.
I rebooted it.
Reboot.
Are you gonna get a job as a Windows admin or what?
I fixed my friend's ice maker.
Really?
Yeah.
Was it like the hose was like crimped or something or not?
You know, that lifting arm
Uh-huh.
had become detached.
Oh, so it was like out?
It was out, and so it would flop up and down, but it was not attached to the little screw that
So
turns the ice maker on and off.
Yeah, I had a guy that had his stopped working and he couldn't figure out what was going on. It was like a small cutting board that fell off the back. It was just hanging there, pinching the water supply hose. So
Okay.
everything was functional. It just couldn't get any water.
A couple of weeks ago, I fixed my neighbor's dehumidifier the same way.
Actually, during the big 8.8 earthquake when I was down in Chile, one of our data centers, the air conditioning system, the refrigerant system, was stopped working.
Hmm.
you know, and we're frantically getting everything back up and running. We're rocking the generator pretty heavy. And we just were like, you know, everything's fine, you know, everything in the building survived perfectly. Not a
the air
single glass fell over, blah, blah, blah. You know, just, you're so used to.
Until 10 minutes later, was when I realized the air conditioner went down.
And then we go in there and look, and the drainage tube to drain the condensate had a kink in it
From the earthquake.
from the earthquake. We had a backed up tiny plastic tube with, you know, water in it, with a little kink, and that just backed up the thing, and it was, so it was horrible.
That is
But you know what? We later put in secondary ventilation system, because we had 3 air conditioning system slots, but we were like, no, we need a vent going up and then, you know, open a door.
Yeah.
You know, we need tertiary. It's always the small things. I don't know if anybody else is coming. Think there's anybody out there at the door?
You got 15 minutes.
Well, we have a door watcher out there.
Haven't heard anything.
We got ding dong if there's somebody there.
Are you still stalling?
Me?
You need to try and drag out the presentation.
Yes, well, I have 2 other keywords for the day.
Go ahead,
The
please.
first one, of course, is neutrality,
Okay.
Yeah, really.
which we can talk about now or at the after meeting.
Or both.
And the second word, when I think of the word, when I say the word dashboard, what do you think of?
I think of some pointy-haired boss.
Really?
Put a dashboard on it. ERP systems have dashboards. They're not reports. You know, it's not a landing screen. It's a dashboard.
Something you bang their head into when you stop.
Well, Lee actually got it right. I was not thinking of the dashboard, which sometimes people refer to the toolbar at the bottom of your screen as the dashboard. Or I'm trying to remember where the other.
You're talking about the thing attached to a firewall, right?
No. I am talking about the cars and the fact
Yeah,
that
it's attached to the firewall.
There was a news item about bringing the internet to the dashboard of your vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
That was in the news today.
There's a lot of cars that already have it.
Yeah. There's, Ford has InSync and Chrysler has something else.
There's the Tesla, all the BMWs,
Yeah.
all the Mercedes now.
That's old news.
Well,
Actually, been making a big thing of it for the last few days.
Well, the big news today was some partnership between Apple and Pioneer.
Isn't that the funniest picture? Gary's 6 inches above the table, and your belt buckle showing.
so what's the takeaway from that, though? I mean, are we supposed to think Junior, the movie, or what?
Oh, Gary wants to be short.
What was it, Junior? What was the name of that movie? Twins.
Twins, yeah.
Twins.
There
Never
was
saw
another
it.
called Junior, but I mean,
Junior was a different one.
a different one.
Yeah, Twins was.
Twins was the one you're thinking of.
So Arnold, does this make me Danny
So-
DeVito?
So on the net neutrality, some people published a basic script of how to call up the FCC, how to request that internet service providers and internet service be classified as Class 2 telecom service, which basically forces it into a fair trade regulation.
They announced it on NPR this evening on Marketplace.
Right, except when they call, they just give you an email.
Okay, I did not call today.
No, I mean, that was on the new NPR coming up here.
Okay.
So
When you
in the
call the
next
number
few
that you-
days, they're opening this up for a comment period, and the public should be able to leave official comments on the docket at the
Well,
FCC.
this is going to be a wonderful situation for the FCC to learn about this thing called the internet. Don't piss it off.
Don't piss the FCC off, or don't piss
Don't
the
piss the internet
off.
off. Which one are you more scared of?
Yeah.
Yes.
Craigslist posting with your address saying take everything?
Not good. Somebody pointed out a couple of weeks ago, some services really require total absolute, reliability and connectivity.
Mhm.
And I think the response to that was, that's the service level agreement, right?
Yeah.
Like if you want a cardiac monitor for a patient.
So cardiac monitor remote for patient would fall under ADA.
Mhm.
And that's where you can order an ISDN line, 128K for $20 a month.
Mhm.
And it falls under the 99.99999% law.
Where it has to
It's
have,
not an SLA, it's a law.
that it has to be there.
Correct. So it's the same as 911 and all these other things.
Mhm.
That's why they're battery powering the stuff.
Mhm.
And that's why fiber to the home, they're putting a battery pack and they're trying to power it over a hacked up ADSL connection.
Mhm.
So they're basically taking some line cards and using the battery charge to bring that battery up.
And things like remote surgery do the same kind of arrangement.
I don't think we can get people to do local surgery properly, right? So, yeah, we need to really, concentrate on that before we do remote surgery.
But that still wouldn't be at home, that's like, hospital.
Well, the remote surgery stuff I'm thinking about is where the specialist is remote and is guiding local doctors or something.
Gary? What's going on?
I'll wake you when the presentation starts. So the designated whipping boy for the net neutrality is Netflix.
Well, so I don't. Are you guys familiar with this level 3's announcement? Have you guys saw this?
Okay,
Okay, so
50 peers and only 4 of them let their pipes get full.
so level 3 is this big backbone, like they've got stuff everywhere, right? So you've got these companies that just basically have the connectivity everywhere, and sometimes these ISPs like Comcast
Verizon, AT&T.
peer to them. Well, AT&T is 2 companies though. The ISP and the backbone are 2 companies. It's actually hilarious. Their backbone is actually going for net neutrality and their ISP is not. It's hilarious. But so level 3 had situations where they could actually measure the traffic across like Comcast. And they could basically say, hey, we're peering with them twice. We know exactly what should go through. And they did some tests. And they literally solved the bandwidth problem. Okay? So they would give them like a big 10 gigabit peering at some data center, and it would never hit the maximum amount. And so one day they just tried to force the maximum amount through to another peer where they were also peering. So IP to IP forcing it. And they did not get but half of the bandwidth. So whether it's idiocy or intentional, they're not allowing the full bandwidth. They're basically claiming they have to charge the customers more to upgrade their backbone. And level 3 is saying the backbone is fine.
Now, how many people in this room are Netflix subscribers? About half. Do you have to have an email address to have a Netflix account?
Yes.
I thought it was restrictive that they would only take comments through email. That there was no website to visit and you could drop a comment, and that they wouldn't take comments over the phone.
You mean for
The FCC.
So, well, maybe the FCC was taking comments over the phone and then got inundated and then maybe changed their position. Because I did see people posting non-800 numbers to dial into the FCC. And maybe that was annoying them. But no, it's a fun issue, and I think it's really great that you got these big hitters. You've got level 3 and you've got Hurricane, just basically these companies that are going, no, you guys are not telling the truth. You have plenty of bandwidth. You're artificially capping it, and here we can prove it. And they published a pretty large paper. It's been discussed pretty pro and con on the NANOG, North American Network Operators Group.
So you think they're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist?
I think they're trying to find a way to bill everybody a little bit more.
trying to create a problem that doesn't exist?
Yeah. Create a new problem.
No, they're just looking for more money.
Well,
they create a new revenue stream that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so a friend of mine and I joked. He was starting up a restaurant, and he joked that we were getting all that stuff in. I was helping him out, and he's like, I want to find a store that ships me things with no stickers on the bottom. And the thing is can we find an ISP that is paperless and doesn't send you advertisements? upgrade.
No stickers on the bottom.
Every month, oh, we can offer you this, oh, you can upgrade that.
Well, there's an easy way around it. Don't use your ISP email, which you shouldn't be using.
No, you
No,
don't.
no, physical address, physical address.
Oh, physical address, okay.
Yeah,
Snail mail.
physical snail mail. I live in a large apartment complex, and every single apartment has internet service through the large apartment complex via a particular provider, Charter. And every single month, every apartment gets the exact same upgrade your thing to current resident at current resident. And every single month, next to the mailbox, there's a big trash can full of these.
One thing I noticed too is we got the bill, which takes up 1 or 2 pages, and then there's another page that's stapled to it or is behind it that is just advertising. And it looks like the bill, so I thought it was bill for the longest time before I started actually looking at it. So that's like my bill volume. I keep my old bills for reference, but
See, yeah, I can handle current
I can
resident.
throw
I
it
can
out.
handle current resident, but current resident and current resident was the big, It literally has it twice. It was hilarious.
The current resident that got my attention this week, which I thought was interesting, is that my brother has some rental property, and so the electric bill comes to, or the phone bill, or the gas bill, or whatever, comes to his address for the service address at some other place, and it's addressed to him or current resident.
well,
Like the current resident of that address would somehow be responsible for the service at this other address.
Well, I'm sure there's some postal code that probably makes that a desirable option. I don't know.
or maybe it's just that's just
Well, you know why it's desirable, that way it doesn't get returned.
Right, and that's the thing is that I don't know. I mean, I would kind of like to know if the person I'm sending an invoice to isn't there anymore.
Yep, they don't want to pay to know it.
Hmm?
They don't want to pay to know it.
Oh, they don't want to pay for the return, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
His return costs the same as regular postage, if not more.
Everything costs money.
The other thing I wanted to throw out with net neutrality, does anyone have reverse from AT&T? So they limit it to like 125 gigs or 200 gigs or something like that a month of downloading and uploading.
Mm-hmm.
But what they don't do is, so they send TV to you over the same exact wire.
Right.
And that's exempt from
Mhm.
this cap. So if I wanted to go pay Netflix to watch all my TV on Netflix, I'd be over that cap in a heartbeat.
Mhm.
But if I want to pay AT&T another 70, 80 bucks a month to watch TV, hey, no
Yeah,
problem.
yeah. And this is the heart of the issue right there. I mean, it's like going to the gas station and buying a full tank of gas, but only getting, what is it? You're getting 40% ethanol or something. You're just, yeah.
Well, he mentioned a data point I'm not familiar with, and that is what does the average user need for bandwidth in his home? Because he made the comment that he doesn't think his Netflix would fit under his AT&T bandwidth cap.
Well, when you call up and you're ordering, and all the advertisement, it says 1 month of internet access. It doesn't exactly nail it down saying it's capped or limited or under control. Back in the dial-up days,
They give you speed, yeah.
And if you go at that speed, you can blow through the cap in like 8 hours or something like that.
yeah.
Well, for those of you who have internet Netflix in your house, who's your provider?
Charter.
Yeah.
For almost all the rest of you?
I use Charter, but it's only provided via the apartment complex. I don't touch it. So.
I just turned off my Charter TV subscription because they promised it would double in 2 years.
So with Charter, you don't have a bandwidth cap? Or
Apparently not.
not even a bandwidth, but
So,
a usage, a gigabyte.
Charter's
cap.
like super slimy about it. They say in their very fine print, yes, there is a bandwidth cap, but they don't tell you what it is. They say if you break it, we'll contact you.
And apparently it's really, apparently they're not that strict about it.
Yeah, they're not. I mean, I've done quite a bit of uploading.
And they bumped the speed up several times over.
What's a picture is a megabyte, right? A song is 3 megabytes.
Something like that.
And a video is a gig an hour. I guess it depends. A raw video is a gig an hour. But right, what's a Netflix stream?
Yeah.
Or a YouTube stream? How many gig an hour is that?
I want to figure out how to monitor that.
Depends.
So yeah, if you want, you can use tools like TC and some other command line tools to actually do shaping and monitoring yourself. So just fire up Cacti and some, however you want to track your stuff.
Instead of, if you got an open WRT kind of router, you can.
I mean, your kernel's keeping it. Your kernel, even if it's in a Netgear standard router, that kernel is, that Linux kernel is keeping a table with the bandwidth. It's just whenever you restart it, of course, it doesn't say that.
I think I know people who are using DSL in Netflix. And DSL doesn't have a bandwidth cap the way, I'm just surprised to hear you say that Uverse has got this data.
No,
Uverse caps are higher than DSL caps.
Yeah.
But I don't do HD, I just, standard definition, that's fine with me.
Okay, so it's an issue of whether you're standard definition or
Yeah.
HD as to how
Well,
fast you'll use it.
So I think with AT&T's DSL, it's 125 or something like that. And maybe 200 for Uverse, except Uverse is like 3 or 4 times faster. You think?
So
I think we do.
You can blow through your
25
cap that much
on a
faster.
T1. Heck, with Charter.
well, no, it's a funny thing though, is you can get a T1 in town for what, $157 a month if you peer in a good place, yeah. So it's actually interesting. You get better service, and I'm talking like 2-hop to anywhere in the world. I mean, you can just it's kind of funny that you can get such better service and such lower latency. An interesting thing to do is go ahead and do some trace routes across your Uverse or across your Charter, and look at how much of your bandwidth is wasted.
Yeah, the first 20 hops are inside Charter.
Yeah, and so if you're on a raw connection, I mean, you're talking 2 hops to pretty much anywhere. You're talking like 3 hops to Afghanistan, and it is just awesome.
Well, at work you might. At work you might. Most other ISPs have peering points in between.
Right, but compared to 30 hops or compared to 20 hops, some of our connections are, it's just like we have this latency advantage. It just makes it feel faster. So, well, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started because we don't have everybody here. Or no, I'm going to go ahead and get started because everybody that cares is here. That sounds like a good way to start. So I'm going to talk about backups. I'm going to lead in, and then we're going to bring up Ken, and he's going to go into some technical stuff. So I'm going to genericize. I wrote this with commercial enterprise-like ideas in mind, but I'm going to try to break it down to consumer-level stuff because that would be good practice for me. There we go. Okay. So why do you do backups? You do backups for a couple reasons. One of them is retention of basically, I really need that data. So for example, you have account information for your customers. You have addresses for your mailing list, your physical mailing list. You have this data that you absolutely must retain. Continuity. This is where you're providing a service, network service, website, email. Maybe you're providing a phone service or something else where you need continuity. It needs to keep running, and it just has to be up. Okay? The data is separate from this. It just needs to keep this service running. You can have this service running saying that you can't access the data at the moment, but it has to keep running to make you look good. Another reason to back up is for migration. So you're getting ready to do a big enterprise migration from A to B, and you want to do backups of everything, which I hope you're already backing up. But still, you want to do backups because you don't trust your upgrade path. And the boss said so. If you're doing backups because the boss said so, you could probably just go right now. I mean, if you don't want to do backups, you need to be woken up and introduced to this thing called information technology. Okay, so when it comes to backups, there's methods of doing backups. So basically, images or imaging is basically taking the entire disk image of your machine and copying it one for one to something else. So maybe you can be like Stan and buy a new hard drive each and every time and put it on a new machine. But this is something where you either have unlimited funds for an enterprise, or you pretty much don't really care about the structure so much, and you just go down to Micro Center and buy a new hard drive every year. And this is, for consumers, this is not a bad thing. That is the step you take if you're going to do migrations. Okay? You are going to upgrade your computer, but you're going to do something, you just image the drive. Have fun with it. You can also do images or snapshots or partition or LVs of virtual machines. So snapshots are a situation where you're basically taking a picture of a system at a particular given time. In some enterprises, they take snapshots like every hour, save them aside. And this is when you have entirely too much money. So if you have that much storage, then yeah, you're wasting it. Sometimes snapshots are good. Taking a snapshot right before you make a configuration change, it's pretty serious. It could, ruin your day. You take a snapshot, do your change, see if everything's working. If it works, great. Remove the old snapshot. So a partition or an LV would be like taking a single partition. So for example, your /home on your Unix system. If you're only going to back up that, then you're kind of basically assuming I can recreate the rest of this environment. And you very likely can. Maybe it's a base install of SUSE, and all you really cared about was your home
There's
directory.
a lot more critical stuff than /home. You get Etsy and bar a lot of times.
But I'm talking about a consumer level. A consumer, they might need just /home. Maybe a /home and var and Etsy.
Yeah.
But it can be done. But it's also taking, I hope I can recreate the rest of the server. Oh no, I forgot about that boot option I did for that sound card, blah, 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 and I didn't back up /boot. So SAN or NAS. So if you're doing your backups via SAN or NAS, you're probably pretty smart. You know everything on this entire presentation. Just twiddle your thumbs for the rest of the talk. Okay, so replication. So whenever you do replication between machine A and machine B, and maybe even machine C, you're basically saying, hey, everywhere I'm replicating, I know those locations are fireproof. And I'll be joking on that for a little bit here. And then third party, I know I'm an idiot about backups.
Let them take care of it.
And this is not a bad place to start for some people.
Yeah, well, a lot of people are quite happy with something like Carbonite.
So
It can be very adequate for a lot of people.
yeah, and when it comes down to pictures your mom's saving away or something like that, sometimes these are really great spots to save things. Sometimes they can be stupid cheap.
So which method does Carbonite use?
Sorry?
Does it use image? Does it use snapshot? What does Carbonite use?
Differential, probably.
What differential?
Well, yeah, we can talk about that. I wanted to not get too into the technical so that Ken can dazzle and amaze us. So retention. Retention is the need to access both the current and historical. So the size of data is not as important as it must be available within X working days. So if your building burns down and you go to access your retention data, maybe on a tape offsite or in a bank vault or something like that, you need to have that back within X number of days. The saving of the data is more important than the actual speed. So this could be a large set of data. It could be hundreds of terabytes worth of data, and it just needs to be accessed within a certain amount of business time. Or for yourself personally, you may have images or all your music backed up on DVDs. You may have them on a shoebox somewhere. You can go and access those within a certain amount of time. So you know they're safe. So the recovery, the speed is secondary to the fact of it's very safe. And it's also very historical, so you can go back in time. So whenever you're dealing with continuity or some other topics, this is not important. So in continuity, your customer-facing service needs to continue to run if we want to keep the lights on. Recovery time is very important. So if you're Netflix, you need to keep your website running no matter what. Even if your website displays a message saying, we are having difficulties, you know, we can't play your movie right now. You have to keep the front door open. So this is a thing that continuity does not always mean 100% functioning. It means acknowledge the problem. Present some status level. Say, hey, we'll be back online in 5 minutes. Or, hey, our building's still on fire. Send the police, you know, send the fire department.
It's good for them to say, we know there's a problem.
That's the thing, you're saving face.
Your call is very important.
When Netflix has gone down, it's usually mostly functional, but then I try to play a movie and nothing happens.
Yeah, and so if Netflix just plain didn't exist
That would be
for a
scary.
moment,
That'd be really scary.
you start checking your internet connection,
Mhm.
your internet connection. And so that's the thing, is that, you know, just throwing up a sign saying, hey, still alive here, just having some trouble, that is more continuity. This can be the same for processing of information, for example, banking information. You may want to have your banking information site saying, hey, we're up, but we're not accessing records at this time. So anyone who's trying to do an EFT or something like this basically gets, you know, kind of told, hey, don't send it right now.
Yeah. On my bank, we from time to time get some kind of a message that says we'll be down for routine maintenance at such and such a time.
And that's preventative, that's awesome. Keep banking there. I'm gonna wait and see who comes in. It's probably Stan.
You're probably right. He called me to say he was on his way.
Can't be Gary, he's already here.
This is a first.
We have
Gary beats
two,
Stan.
We have 2 other Garys, don't we?
Yeah, we have a few Garys.
We only have 2 Stans. We have.
It's just like Daryl's.
I'm
Gary, and Gary.
I'm here early because I'm standing in for the other Gary.
Uh,
It's a shift type thing. There always has to be one Gary present.
Gary, Stan, and Gary. And Stan.
By the way, Mary Fran played the wife on Newhart. She's from St. Louis, and she was doing an interview one time. The 2 guys who played Daryl, they never talked. They never had one word in the entire series. And the way they do the show is when they get the new script, the first thing they do every week is come into a room like this with a big table. The whole cast sits around the table and they just read through it and just read their lines.
So Daryl and Daryl were there.
The 2 Daryls came to every one of those meetings.
Oh, my.
We were beginning to worry, Stan. Actually, we're still worrying.
I know, you should always work.
Did you hit anybody?
Huh?
Did you hit anybody?
No, but the detonation should be in about,
Don't say that. We're on an NSA.
We are recording here.
Pardon the informal
Take that
atmosphere
straight
here,
back
but
to me
most of
anyway.
us have known each other for a long time, so, you know, it's just nothing to worry about. We harass people all the time.
Yeah, there will be a test later for everybody's name. Okay, Jeremy. I'm going to go ahead and start back up here, Stan.
From the beginning?
Thank you.
No, not from the beginning. He can catch up. So back to continuity. As we discussed, it's basically keeping the lights on, keeping the front door open, and saying, hey, we've got an issue. We know about it, and we want you to continue to give us money some way, shape, or form. So when it comes to migration, this is where you have a lack of confidence in where you're going. So lack of confidence in a solution, do backups first. Cover your butt, maneuver a cover your butt maneuver that highlights a deficient lab environment. So it's basically saying, hey, we have no great way of testing this, no great way of validating this, so we're going to do backups first.
You mean we're name tags. And Andrew doesn't have one.
Huh?
Andrew doesn't have one.
I have a couple badges. I think I have my passport over here too.
Andrew, now I'm here. I wasn't here till now.
So how many of you guys have done migration backups? Stan does them all the time.
We're
I'm
about
not
to
sure
do
what you
it.
call migration backup.
That's what we're about to do at Middiv.
So migration backup is basically saying that you are about to perform some great big action and you want to just take a backup to kind of get you back rolling because you're migrating that hardware from A to B. So you may have some production hardware and you're doing an upgrade.
Well, actually, it's not a backup. We're going to put in new disks and then build a new system and keep the old disks for the backup.
Right.
Same thing.
So, and that's
It's migrated.
well, it's kind of preventive because the old disk might still be working to some level, right?
They are.
Yeah, but they're 7 years old, so it's time for new ones
Right.
anyway.
So you're doing something called preventive backups,
Okay.
which is kind of strange to most of us.
Oh, it's broken. Oh no, here's on fire.
Okay, so hurdles of doing backups are normally funding. Who's going to pay for the extra hardware, the extra disk? Nobody likes to do preventive, except for Lee over here. Turnover.
Well, it's the only sane way to,
I'm sorry?
the only sane way to jump 5 years on the OS.
Yeah, well, problem is not all of us work with sane people.
Yeah.
So funding is usually a pretty big hurdle when it comes down to having a spare network card or having an extra, we're talking like a $20 network card these days, and it's still difficult for companies to keep cold spares. Cold spare is basically an identical piece of production equipment that is sitting on a shelf not plugged into anything. So,
Not earning money.
So basically, whenever your UPS blows up and fries everything in your data center, you've got a cold spare which has not been plugged in. Warm spares are a different guy altogether.
This brings back to mind the way I saw a presentation on Tandem. I think it was at Slack about how everything is duplicated, and if something fails, the system operator finds out when the technician comes in to replace it, because the machine has done a service call, has submitted a service order. So, I mean, that's a hot spare, though.
Yeah, and that's some pretty advanced stuff to what I'm going to talk about right here. But again, having some of this new hardware, which is a later slide, we can discuss that. Turnover. So keeping the staff if everything is working. A lot of companies, as soon as everything's working, they start cutting heads, and then things break, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa. And this is a vicious cycle that affects backups pretty bad. So this is a pretty big hurdle too, because don't let the guy go that did the backup stuff, because that cron job may have been a manual cron job.
Manual cron job?
Yeah, every morning comes in and does it.
That's interesting.
Well, don't tell me you've never seen this.
No, because I don't work in environments like yours.
Okay. No, I've worked in lots of environments, and I've seen this a few different places.
It's a Hispanic name. The operator's name was Manuel Kron. He came in every morning.
Well, that would be a German last name.
German last name.
Well, there's a lot of German names in Mexico.
Yeah. Training. One thing that's interesting, I've seen this over and over again, is that end users think, hey, everything's being backed up, great, I'll just delete everything. And they don't understand this delicate cycle where the backups are being told the user deleted this on purpose.
So
And-
backup
and-
purges it.
Well, over time,
Yeah,
the backups are all purged.
Mhm.
And the user's like, well, I thought it was backed up. And this is a training issue.
Well,
Just because something's backed up doesn't mean it's retained forever unless that data is deemed important for retention.
or you're maintaining it in WebDAV or something like that.
Right, but you might, so when data comes into retention mode, you might have a write-only mode where you do not delete. Go ahead.
Okay. I worked in an environment where they said they backed things up and you could never get anything restored regardless, period.
Okay,
So you
and-
really
and-
had to do your own.
And I will actually talk about that very point here in a couple minutes, okay? The blame game. This is a fun one in big organizations. Nobody wants to complete the backup project because they are afraid it's going to fail and they're going to get canned. This is a fun thing. Basically dragging the backup project out for years because of fear.
Well, if it ever gets completed, then you get turned over, right?
Yeah.
I don't understand, how can there be a backup project that's gonna go on for such a long time?
We've never got it working
Come,
quite right.
hey,
so
come
yeah.
to the office with me tomorrow. we can't plan ahead,
Oh, okay.
but we've got projects that are not gonna complete for another 10, 15, 20 years.
Oh, the military has some,
Yeah, same thing.
they're called retirement
We're
programs.
recording, I'm not gonna say anything.
Also called wars.
Cheapskates. Cheapskates, these are the people that will go on eBay and buy a 1 terabyte drive
Mhm.
and
A used 1 terabyte drive.
put all their data on it and then start cussing whenever it fails. Or the sticker peels off that shows it was a different size drive.
Mhm.
I was dealing with a company who was working in China, and they had sent one of their senior engineers, who was a friend of mine. They sent him over there, and he really needed a USB drive to get some data. Okay, not very proprietary. It was kind of important that it remain private, but so he went out and he bought this USB drive. It said 320 gigabyte on it. This was 2007
That was a lot.
On a
back
thumb
then.
drive?
on a thumb drive. So what it turned out to be is a 32 megabyte drive with the partition table changed.
Oops.
So he copied all this information that he really needed. I mean, the company really needed to get this, and it was more of design information. It wasn't actually anything, super proprietary. It was just stuff he needed to get work done, and something the company needed to get some work done. And he proceeded to copy this all on. He got on an airplane and flew for 20 some hours. Got home and went to working, and he's like, "Hey Andy, what's wrong here?" And I stop over and I check it out, and I'm like, "Dude, think about it. 320 gigabytes?
In
On a thumb drive?
Yeah." And that $5 charge really didn't be the tip off though. That was the part that I didn't get.
$5 for.
Yeah.
I had the same thing. I got a thumb drive in South America. It was in like blister wrap. It looked
Mhm.
legit.
Yeah.
But it said 16 gigs and it was like
Seriously,
4
though,
or something. With the partition table.
you can recover the cost of the blister wrap machine very fast.
Yeah. Suckers like me.
So yeah, cheapskates. This is an interesting topic, especially for consumers, because you go down to Micro Center. Micro Center's selling all new stuff, and you buy a cheap thing. That's probably going to be okay. But if you go to a car boot sale, or what do they call it in the U.S.? A yard sale or a swap meet. If you go to a swap meet and buy a hard drive for cheap, you've got some other issues with your decision process.
The only thing you buy hard drives at a swap meet for is target practice.
Or if they're antiques and you're just collecting.
Well, yeah.
That's good.
Bill,
Part of it,
Bill,
yeah.
by the way, Bill is not here, but we have a story. We were out at the Old Monroe, and he had stopped on the way there at the yard sale and bought this hard drive from the guy that had bought a new one and he was selling it, whatever. And during lunch, we set up the test disk to recover the files.
Right.
Got back all kinds of gay porn.
Well, who knows? Maybe that was his way of wiping what was really on there.
I buy used hard drives from a friend sometimes, and he puts really good stuff on it, so that used hard drive then is
Has more value?
It has more value because of the data on it. Than it's like
So are we
a decent
talking,
collection of movies and music and backdrops.
and freely available, not proprietary movies.
Right. Yes, of course.
So yeah, cheapskates is a fun topic. Most of you are probably don't fall into this, but occasionally you meet this guy who does this. They buy the thing and they expect it to be full-blown, If you buy it for a joke or you buy it because it's funny, that's one thing. If you buy it because it's $1, oh well. But if you go out and you're looking for a big storage drive and you go to a
Yard sale and spend $10 on a 2 terabyte drive.
yeah, you're just asking for trouble. So that's a very funny one.
Best case is it's already worn out.
Right.
It's really what it says, but it's.
I've seen this in enterprises.
There's also friends and family that do not know what a megabyte and a
Yeah.
kilobyte and a gigabyte. And
Right, but they're probably not running out and buying a drive off of a table at a swap meet. Just to be fair, though.
Auctions from universities.
Yes, auctions from universities. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, so software solutions. I'm going to just roll through some real quick. I searched GitHub and I saw about 10,000 results. So there's no way we could ever finish this list. For bare metal, I like to use Mondo Archive. I've talked about RSnapshot before. Backup PC, Bacula, which Ken will talk about, Resync, RDiff, TAR, Fog Project, which I really like and have pushed in some enterprises, NC, and many, many more. How many of you guys have used Mondo Archive? It's probably the longest running bare metal recovery system out there. What it does is it will literally look at every file where it's supposed to be, create an index, copy them all away, tar them away, and it will make a boot, DVD, CD, and it will make a series of them so that you can bare metal recover that server onto almost any new hardware. So it's pretty impressive.
Obviously, it doesn't work with Windows.
That's how that project got started.
You're kidding.
And there was a legal battle. It now only does Linux.
No, I'm saying with Windows, you can't do a bare metal restore unless you're on the same hardware. It blows up.
Correct. Yeah. But it was originally used to be able to clone the thing and blah, blah, blah. People got mad, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. The current head developer, Bruno, works with HP over in France, and he's pretty awesome. Very active project, though. RSnapshot we talked about, which is kind of like a Resync wrapper, Resync over here. Backup PC is kind of like I'm at home, I've got an extra hard drive, or I've got a small home network. I'm going to do some point-and-click GUI backups.
Andrew,
Yeah.
I wouldn't put RSnapshot in that list.
Why not?
RSnapshot's versioning. RSnapshot is not backup.
Well, it can work over the network.
True, but all it does is use rsync to create versions.
Correct, but it can do it just to disk, and it can keep it automated. And that's kind of the thing, is that it's a backup for a specific purpose. So, for example, tar is probably used in most of these.
Yeah.
But I'm still going to throw it on there because it is important.
Well, the point I was making is a backup and versions are two different concepts. You know, a backup is backs up a machine. But what about somebody did actually delete a file a week ago and you need a backup from a week ago? Well, that's a version issue.
Correct, but by default, RSnapshot encourages you to use multiple locations. That was my reasoning. And no, versioning is a different project. RDiff is an interesting thing. If you ever get a chance with it, look it up. It's basically a RSnapshot and Resync for massive images across big networks. So if you want to throw a big disk image out to 400 nodes, you can kind of do it with, There's also CloneZilla and some other projects I missed on here that are very important. Fog Project is a enterprise desktop management solution, which will literally let you image and recover and alter all of the desktops in your enterprise. It's a great backup solution. Anyone use NC for backups?
Not in the last 20 years.
You haven't? When I get some time, I'll talk.
And see what's at the numerical calculator?
Netcat.
Netcat. Here, let's So I ran into this issue of moving migrating large sparse files over a network. Have you guys used sparse for large systems? Sparse is when you have a massive image, but most of it's empty. And you can actually tell the Linux kernel, this file is mostly empty, and then what it does is it creates a sparse hole in it, and it does not use the disk space.
It reserves all that space.
So you can go into a directory and type ls, and then it'll say 400 terabyte, but there's only a couple terabyte in there. It's a nice little trick.
I've seen a file that said that it was larger than the disk drive.
Yep, and that's a sparse system. It's very handy. Red Hat uses it for some of its log systems. But yeah, this is on my website if you guys ever want to find it and read about it. But this is a very fun hack where transferring sparse over the network, all the tools don't understand sparse. So
Yeah.
tar tries to send the whole thing. Resync tries to do a checksum on the sparse file like every few cycles of sending it. And so trying to do a checksum on a file that's not technically there, it's not technically that large, is very, 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 very difficult and fun. And another caveat I hit was, running this over SSH caused SSH to go crazy. Basically, you're consuming all the bandwidth with SSH trying to push a big file.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So it just goes crazy. So basically, it came down to using tar, which does support sparse very well, by the way, and NC to pipe it across the network.
And gzip to compress it, or
Mm,
EZ2, or
You got to be careful with that. You can use tar to do some basic level compression. Otherwise, you're going to chew your CPU to nut crazy.
Okay.
Because I was doing this on a production system.
What's the link to this page?
I have lathama.com, .us, .org, .net.
I'm
Just
I'm
click
on
on CLI.
CLI, that's the part I was.
Yeah.
Okay, I see a C something there, but it couldn't read the other 200.
So I've got a bunch of stuff like that, but yeah, we can go in about that. So other than, I think Clonezilla is not on this list, what are some other backup software that you guys have used?
I interrupted you to say something about backup PC.
Okay. Backup PC is like a GUI-friendly desktop. I'm at my house. I want to back up to another hard drive. I want to back up across the network. It's actually very easy to use. Go ahead and play with it.
So which of these work with Windows clients?
Fog Project is probably the only thing on the Fog and Bacula. Bacula is probably the best, but those are probably the only two things on this list that are specific for Windows. Bacula works with pretty much everything that exists, right?
I don't know about everything, but it does have
Everything built with
does
OS.
have Windows client support.
So, yeah, if you're going to do Windows backup support, we're going to let Ken amaze you because you added Windows support to your presentation or not?
I only gloss over it lightly.
Okay, well that's good. That's more than I wrote on mine. Okay, and let's jump on here. So services. For third-party services, probably the oldest thing out there is ResyncNet. How many of you guys have used this in the past or currently? It's a monster.
These days.
I'm sorry?
It's really expensive these days compared to.
But everything's encrypted by default, and it's good. I mean, yeah, it's actually cost to cost. It's not that expensive whenever you get into their large volume. They really start out at a terabyte. You can do gigabytes for small stuff, but like he says, it's really not cost effective. So it's kind of like Google Compute Engine and Amazon Web. They only hit their strides whenever you're buying a lot.
Should there be another area?
I threw up Dropbox, AWS, Google Compute Engine, thousands of companies that want your money.
By the way, one neat thing about Dropbox, it's web dev, it does versioning behind the scenes. So if you want the copy you deleted a year ago, you can still get it.
So there's probably an endless supply of services. Some of these can be great. So, and you can mix it up. Maybe you have some family videos and family photos that you need backed up, and you will get divorced if they're lost. Use a service. If you are marginally interested in the log files you've been saving because they were funny, you don't really need to put those on a service. So this is where data retention comes in. Depending on the level of data retention and how fast you want it recovered, a service may be a better solution. Now, if you have some silly amount of VM images, Dropbox is not going to be your friend.
If you have some silly amount of VM images, you never even get them out of your box.
Right, and that's what I'm trying to say is that there's some situations where your practice is going to dig your hole for you.
I don't understand what you're covering.
I'm sorry?
I don't understand what you're referring to. The,
Virtual machine images
yeah,
can be very large,
right.
and sometimes people will go crazy and they'll have like,
Oh, they'll back up the virtual image machine?
no, they'll create 5 virtual images, they'll create 10 virtual images, and then they'll install Dropbox on their computer. And then they'll expect Dropbox to start backing those up. And then they'll wonder why it doesn't work.
Yeah, okay.
Because any change to one of those images, the whole image has to be resynced.
Yeah, well, and see, Dropbox can be intelligent about this, but think about like a terabyte of VM images, and all of a sudden you're wondering why your Dropbox is full.
Well, if you think about it, VM is essentially a sparse file.
Can be. Some systems don't.
I mean, to
configure
the
that.
external file system, it's really a sparse file.
No, Windows 7 and up support sparse barely, and I think it was 2.6.
No.
Lee, I don't know that the file is sparse, but the changes are sparse.
No, the point is, if you've got a 20 gig VM image, there may be only 2 gig of data in it, but an external backup
Right.
that's not running from inside the VM sees a 20 gig file.
Right, exactly.
Ooh, that's
Exactly.
even lower.
Yeah. So that's kind of
That's what I mean by it being a sparse file to an external backup.
that's right. So yeah, it kind of doesn't understand what it's seeing. I'm going to jump over here. What we got here? Hardware. I could talk about hardware for days on this. I could talk for days on this topic alone, and I've dealt with so many silly people that it would become more of a rant than a discussion. Physical hardware will always break. It's just a matter of when and not how. We will leave hardware for another day or during a pizza consuming event over on Woodson. Okay? Just like our cheapskate conversation earlier, hardware's a slippery slope. Okay? And the thing is don't worry about how, worry about when. Like Lee was talking about earlier, they're doing some preventative hard drive replacement. Don't worry about how, worry about when. When are you comfortable with that server blowing up? 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning? Probably not too thrilled about that concept. Memorial weekend? You probably don't want that. So spend the little bit of amount of time it takes to do those upgrades during normal business hours, where you can run down to Micro Center and get that part you need. Do not do these things. Do not assume that you got everything. Okay, earlier I gave an example of having a boot flag for your sound card in your /boot directory, and you didn't back that up. Expect that you are, do not expect that you are getting the truth. So if your users tell you that's everything, but they're saving all their important documents in a recycle bin, be prepared to yell, be prepared to scream, maybe even throw things at them. How many of you guys have actually found users storing documents in a recycle bin because it was always on the desktop? Oh, it's funny now. It's funny now.
I had heard it all.
It's funny now. It's not funny when that computer, you destroyed the hard drive and threw it in the dumpster yourself. That's when it's not funny. I'm bitter on that topic, sorry. Skimp. Spend money. Not EMC money, but spend money on backups.
What's EMC?
That place where you just shovel your money into.
The big sand vendor that has a very poor reputation.
Their billing department's better than their service department, if you know what I mean.
And if I remember correctly, their hardware is like 4 times the physical size of everybody else or something like that.
Yeah, but the price is an order of magnitude by 4.
Yeah, okay.
So whenever it comes to like doing your backups, spend the money, actually have some hard drives. Own an extra hard drive. Okay, what is it at Micro Center? How much can you, what's a drive at Micro Center cost these days? Anybody buy one recently?
About $70.
What?
A terabyte is about $70.
Okay.
About 3 terabytes for 150.
Yeah. Skip a steak dinner or 2 and put a drive on the shelf. It might save your friend's butt. Maybe you're fine,
especially if it's the same physical drive you have in the machine. That way you can image it without changing geometry.
And on this topic, I don't like talking about hardware, but I'll talk about this. I have a friend that does storage for his business. He does financial industries. He does scientific. He does governmental agencies. He does storage systems you couldn't imagine. He actually has a shelf with every controller card for every hard drive he's ever sold. Because if he gets a hard drive back with the controller card fried, he needs to be able to put a new controller card and read that drive. But it gets better. He actually has them all sorted by the firmware version. Because some firmware versions were faster than others. Some were slower. Some caused data corruption at particular write rates. So whenever it comes to hardware like that, having a spare drive is always a good thing. If you're going to buy a terabyte drive, you've got the funds, buy two. Sit one on the shelf. If something goes wonky with it, you've got some way to kind of recover it.
Or if you're building an array with 20 drives, put 2 or 3 on the shelf.
Let's see, if you're doing a big array, you're going to buy from 3 vendors, you're going to mix. Because if there's a pallet failure, aka the entire pallet has an issue, you need some safety.
So you get a different brand mixed in there.
You have to.
Okay.
When
That's an interesting
yeah.
concept. Yeah, I like that.
So, trust. Don't trust the salesman. Drobo, they make great products. Their salesman doesn't do anything to convince you. They just make great products. You get some things, you have an infomercial at 2 a.m., buy our NAS.
But wait, there's more.
At Ronco. So
Ronco NAS.
sometimes,
Act now.
sometimes if they put that much money in a salesman, you need to be worried. Because they did not put that money in research and development.
Operators are standing by.
So, convolute. Can you, okay, so do not convolute your backups. Can you explain to this room your backups for your company, your home? Okay? Will you get strange looks at us, get strange looks from us if you try to explain it?
We're going to find out, we're going to see how that works in just a minute.
So sometimes, you know, it's like you're unplugging you're changing your network cables to do your backup. If explaining that to one of your peers makes them do like a really funny look at you, so yeah, there are really silly backup things I've seen out there, and they're convoluted, so they're complex beyond normal complexity. They're complex because people are silly. Go ahead, Stan, tell us a story.
When I first started doing system operations, the guy that was training me for backups, we would do it on a Friday night. And 4 or 5 Friday nights in a row, and I finally realized he was doing it different every time. So,
Yeah, and actually we'll talk about that here in a moment. Do these things. Document. The second you document your backups in a business, your peers will start to trust you more. That's a good thing. It's a double win. Storyboard. Go ahead, grab a whiteboard. Start storyboarding like you're making a movie of horror situations. Draw flames on your building. Draw a flood taking out your building. Draw some horror stories. It will actually help you understand your backup better. You'll have some fun. You'll get some laughs. The creativity saves, and that's a pun. Off-site. Georeplication is a feature of most file systems these days. Your Butter and your Gluster and all these things, you just turn on georeplication. And you give each node an idea of where it is in the world. And you say you can't be within so many feet of this one. And all of a sudden, georeplication. So this is a very common feature. Don't be afraid to use it.
If you have the bandwidth. If you have the bandwidth.
Yeah, but it has to value your data. If it's absolute retention stuff, yeah, you got to do it.
Well, it's not a question if, it's a question of make sure you do, I guess.
Yeah, but you can bandwidth throttle, maybe the syncing, so you're not saturating your bandwidth or something like that. You can buy a private line in between 2 businesses in the same city. Okay?
You can carry a hard drive across town.
Yeah. with units of Brown, Robert Brown at Duke University, my old friend, he would put all the tapes in the back of the station wagon and drive across the country.
Nowadays, that means
Had a
UPS,
great
doesn't it?
burst rate.
Doesn't Brown refer to UPS nowadays? though?
What his name is actually.
Yeah, I mean, that's
And-
kind of a great.
It is kind of cute. But when we were joking about this on the Beowulf list, it was units of Brown, station wagon full of tapes going down the highway.
The highest bandwidth you can afford. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, the burst rate was amazing. So stock, have some spare hardware shelved.
Yes.
We've talked about that. I could probably nail on that 10 more times. Just take the hint. Monitor. Okay, here's something. A lot of companies don't do monitoring very well. They set up everything. They get one system that constantly errors, and pretty soon everybody just starts putting an Outlook rule or an email rule to block those emails or delete them automatically. And so we create our own problem. And so monitoring can be an issue. And you can actually catch your hard drive failures. You can catch something else. Monitoring for a full hard disk. What happens if your program that's storing the data doesn't understand what a full hard disk is and just continues to pipe stuff in there? You're losing stuff and there's no traceability to what's happening. Print out a Go book. There's many names for this. Some people call them playbook. Some people call them the emergency book, the disaster recovery book. Print out a Go book. The Go book could have your Dropbox account and password, username and password on it. It could have which machine had which data. It could have network information for where things were. It could have a step-by-step on how to recover your entire enterprise. Print it out. Some enterprises actually have people, big staff groups with 20 people doing this all day long. Okay? Write something for your significant other or your family to find the pictures if you get hammered by a Mack truck.
Make sure your LastPass passphrase is in the safe somewhere on a nice red piece of paper people can find.
Yeah, but maybe take your LastPass and print everything out and put that paper with everything on it in the safe.
But the first thing is your LastPass passphrase, because that's your passwords may change, your sites may change, but if they can get into your vault, then if you get by a bus, then somebody can fix it.
One of the problems with that is you need to write the instructions for the user to use LastPass if they don't understand it.
If they don't know how to use LastPass, they're not going to make sense of what's in it. So I'm not sure that's much value.
Right, and that's the thing. Instead of Go book, you need to write it in a specific way so that whomever can or whomever you really want to access your information. So if it's an enterprise, you basically need to write it for the stupidest person on earth. If it's for your family, you might want to write it in a different way. But it's basically saying, hey, this is where my stuff is. This is your digital will for your consumer stuff. But for your business, maybe it's more complex. Hey, look, test your backups. I was expecting an emotional response. Bare metal test. That's basically taking a relatively identical server or a relatively identical desktop and validating your test from bare metal up. So that's just saying everything went wrong. Here's a new machine. Here's a recovery. If you pass this one, you're doing awesome. I would say a large majority of the people and the businesses can't even touch that one. Okay. Document network dependencies. Okay, yeah, sure, you can recover your website. However, your BGP router is dead and you're dead in the water. So this is a situation where your continuity was destroyed, but your data retention was working. So you need to be able to continuity, you need to be able to keep your network working so that you can actually present that data.
You might want to add to that is somewhere, if you ever do it anywhere else, a backup is not just data.
Mm-hmm. It's actually later on the slides.
Right, okay.
So prove to someone else you can do it, okay? And I'll talk about that one a little bit in a few moments. Validate your restore. So this is an interesting thing I ran into from time and again, where people do not have services that automatically start. And so you go and you restore the server. It's just like the old server, but the user had manually started some service. They manually started the database, and so the initd or whatever did not actually start up that service. And so you need steps to validate. You know,
Sometimes it can be set up to where it's supposed to start, but it really doesn't start, and you have to do manual intervention, even though it looks like it's set up to start automatically.
so, for example, passwords saved in dot files and hidden files in home directory or something like that. It happens. Schedule review sessions. This is kind of hard for people to sit down and do because we're all so busy. But, you know, if you sit down and review your storyboard, you sit down and review your Go book, you can sit there and find defaults without the action happening, without the destruction happening, and you're not buying anything. You're using your time. Sometimes some time is very expensive, but hey, you know, and then use your printed Go book. Or, as I'll talk about here in a moment, we can find other ways of doing this. Okay. So all of backups are common sense. Practice it. Don't preach it. Find a peer in the industry, somebody in this room maybe, to offer and test each other's Go books. So find somebody else and just say, hey, you know, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. You come in not knowing the infrastructure, not knowing the company, and go through the Go book. So you're a peer, you trust them because they come here and have beer and pizza with you. Okay? So find a peer in the industry. Okay? Learn more as the industry changes, you know. Some new invention comes up with a hard drive and it's like bulletproof, but you don't know. You could just continue buying hard drives. I think the best analogy I can use is the button-up shirts. Like almost every button-up shirt you buy now has an anti-wrinkle thing in it. You don't need to worry about ironing. And this was a surprise to me as I came back to the US. Don't back up Linux distro ISOs, Stan, unless you have nothing better to do.
Unless your servers are more than a couple of years old.
Well, yeah. So
Yeah,
if it's for recovery, though, that's a fine thing. But I've actually seen people who would actually have a directory in the home folder where they have downloaded all these ISOs they want to play with someday. And then they start the backup, but the backup never finishes. And they normally like call that directory like ISO. And so it never gets to the P for picture. And so they actually never finish their backups. They never get the data they want. And they're surprised when horrible things happen.
That's why it's nice to be able to designate some directories as not being backed. Time Machine has that feature.
Right.
You can say, here's a list of things not to back up.
And so our snapshot is pretty good with includes and excludes, except the hierarchy can be maddening at times.
How to get the wildcards to really work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, wildcard ISO is going to, help you a little bit.
Well, yeah, but it's like there's some wildcards we've set up that just don't.
Yeah, I got a 30 terabyte directory. I want one file that's a subdirectory in a subdirectory there. Or I want a subdirectory in a directory that's 30 terabytes. It takes like 4 lines of includes and excludes to do it.
Yeah.
And it took me a heck of a long time to figure out.
Yeah, but then you get some hard links going on and things go fun.
This may sound a little anal, or maybe just.
We are all about it. Let's hear
that
it.
I look at the world from a system administrator's perspective, but whatever you've done to organize your file system, whether you put it chronologically or alphabetically or topically or whatever you've done to organize your data, think about making backup and retention part of that organization. Putting the stuff that you need in over on this part of the tree and part of the stuff that you want over on this part of the tree, and so that it makes your includes and excludes simpler.
And thank you. I could not have.
One
said
case
that
is music, right? So I have the top levels called MP3s or music or whatever like that. But the next level down is stuff that I own, stuff that I got from someplace else, stuff that I created personally. So that's like the most valuable because there's no way to recreate that.
So no, that's actually, you touched on a very funny topic I hit a lot, is that whenever it comes to data retention, in enterprise, you're retaining like a database. And it constantly changes a little bit. Little record gets updated here and there. Your MP3 collection, does not change from the second it's on the box. You don't ever edit your MP3s, do you?
My wife is, oh, you mean an MP3 editing and MP3?
Yeah.
Only to the extent of you may go in and start editing some of the tags.
So, right.
Yeah,
And
that's a
good,
good
good
thing.
example. But, let's just pretend all your tags are right. You only need to back that up once. Put it on DVD, and you can run that exclude. And I've actually seen some people.
Well, you say back it up once, but it's growing, right? So you need to do incrementals on it.
Right, and that's the thing is you can really kind of configure some of your stuff. So you have your picture collection, and you have it sorted by year. You don't need to back up every year, every time you do a full, because you may have them on 2 DVDs and
The
2
pictures
books.
are a better one, because usually you don't categorize your MP3s by year, but a lot of times you do categorize your pictures by
Right.
year.
So that's probably a good example of difficult and easy to sort out. So. Okay, so security. Okay, so encrypt your transports. If you're going over the internet, encrypt it. You can use TLS, don't use SSL, use TLS, and get your backups, your transports encrypted. So encrypt your data. Sometimes on your far end, if you're using some server you control, you can actually do your encryption on both sides during the transport, whatever. So you can have your transport encrypted and just have the standard out from SSH dumping into tar, which is dumping into something else. And so it's all the way across. Encryption costs CPU. So sometimes it's hard to do. So if you encrypt your data first and then send it over a normal connection, it might be more efficient for your system. So I'm talking about some massive box that's, it's hitting the 9s all the time. I mean, I've sent servers up into the 4,000 tick count per cycle, which reads as 4,000% CPU usage. Okay, and it's funny, but you can actually ruin some hardware because the kernel will let you do it. So just be safe. Secure your infrastructure. Secure your backup infrastructure. You're storing tapes. Maybe you're not so worried about the theft because of where they are, but what if people think they're funny and start playing with them? What if somebody's going to do an art project and they need magnetic tape to do their little funny art project? And they're just all sitting on the shelf with little labels on them. So secure your infrastructure. Make sure people don't think that they can just go walking off with it. I need an extra hard drive to store movies at home. Oh, look, there's a shelf full of hard drives. It's happened. Just secure your infrastructure. Firemen don't care. They spray. Put plexiglass in front of your rack mounts. Just think about it. If a fire happens at your home, even if it's relatively small, they're going to soak it.
I heard this one many years ago. There were like dust covers you could get for your printer and your computer and stuff like that. And somebody pointed out that putting that dust cover on at the end of the day when you shut the thing down, that is the best protection against this kind of damage.
So so like if in a data center you order a whole bunch of these rack mounts and they have ventilation everywhere, it's not so cool. You actually need to take those doors off, get some plexiglass doors with down vents. They look like car hoods where they suck air up into them. And you can basically protect yourself from that nightmare. Of course, I hope you have your data center behind Fort Knox and nobody can get in it. So, the sun is a UPS. The sun is an uninterruptible power supply. Everything else is temporary. We can probably.
It's not an UPS. It goes out every night and it often hides behind the clouds.
That oatmeal article had a thing about the place to put exploding fireballs is not right next to my testicles, is the way I said it. Yeah.
So this is an interesting topic. Lee and I had a discussion a couple of months ago about UPSs, batteries, and power stuff. Just because a UPS is a UPS doesn't mean it's going to last 10 years. Doesn't mean it's going to last 1 year. Have a plan. Have a part number written on the wall in case it starts acting funny. Maybe you don't want to spend the extra money and have it sitting there, but you need to have a plan for quickly ordering a replacement. I have seen so many people arguing over what to replace it with while it's dying.
And sometimes they die in strange ways, like just decide to turn themselves off
Randomly.
randomly.
Yeah. And another thing, monitoring. They have serial consoles. They have network consoles now. You can ask it what's going on. So, for example, in most of these new cordless drills, for example, they're multi-cell. If one cell has a problem, it will not allow the other cells to charge. And that's why you see these things getting chucked now. Is because the NiCads are better because it's just a very simple thing to recover. Whereas the multi-cell, you actually have to take it apart and test each cell.
And then reprogram the CPU that determined that it was delayed.
Yeah, it's annoying. It's annoying. So
I used to want something like that when I was building NiCads for film school.
this bottom one, I've seen this on businesses so large.
Mhm.
I'm laughing today. That was 10 years ago. I mean, companies that would complain that they would have a failure, but they forgot to pay their bill.
There's so many stories related to that. But
Do you guys understand this? Are you
Yes,
silent for a reason?
I have a customer who once neglected to renew their name registration.
Yeah. No, I watched a company drop 9 T1s because they forgot to pay the bill.
This sounds like a lot like when I worked at the phone company. There was a regional vice president whose cell phone bill ran out, and so her phone got turned off.
Yeah.
And then there's another one where somebody had redundant network feeds out of the building, and they're both going through the same place. They both got taken up by the same backhoe.
Mm-hmm.
And then another time, somebody had redundant through 2 different companies and discovered both companies were using the same trunk lines.
Mm-hmm. So, and what he's discussing is network redundancy, which is also a very awesome topic by itself. But sometimes your backups are thwarted by things that are out of your control. Your system administrator, you can't handle purchasing dropping the ball, but you can maybe figure out how to verify it. Maybe be in the approval process or some other way to kind of verify every month that bill is getting paid. Because it's going to look bad on you if the internet goes out, even if purchasing forgot to put the check in the envelope and send it on its way.
It's still your fault.
It's your fault no matter what. And let's see here, what else we got? Thanks. Yeah,
Thank you.
There's me. And I think I put some more thoughts on here. How do you I think Stan touched on this. How do you restore a closed source backup? You have proprietary backup software. How do you restore that backup?
Good question.
Hmm?
That's why you don't want to do it.
Huh?
Don't do it.
No, and this is the thing, is that I've seen companies and other groups, they'll have some proprietary system, and they will not pay for the license to continue it, and suddenly they're just like, oh, wow, how do we get this data back? How do we retain it? I've dealt with this with medical records, where the medical records are stored in a particular format, and that format was not actively being developed at a later date. And so we had to present a cycle to make sure that data got migrated forward.
There's so many variations on that.
So I had a conversation with Lee about this one. What does faster networking gear cost these days? How much does 10 gig network card cost?
Network card?
Yeah.
I don't know, a couple $100 probably.
I saw right before we came, I looked one up. It was a dual port for $275. Okay, so it's coming to the days when the high-speed network equipment is coming down so fast, it's just amazing. So if you have server to server and you want to do backups, you can get a 10 gig card for a couple $100 and make your backups faster. Make them take up less of the night than they probably currently are.
How about a switch? What does the faster switch cost?
They're dropping just as fast.
Doppler shift.
What does RAIN mean?
What does RAIN mean?
Any of you guys use RAIN?
It's when the GPS signal isn't reliable.
RAIN RAIN is redundant array of inexpensive nodes.
Ah, yes, we saw a presentation. of it.
Yes, and this is something you guys have to start playing with. So let's just say you got a server and you plug in a bunch of hard drives. You got another server, plug in a bunch of hard drives. Another server, you plug in a bunch of hard drives. You can actually make those 3 servers a RAID array across your network. So you increase your write speed and you increase your read speed because you're going across a larger array of drives.
It changes what the small component is. The small component becomes the server with the
Right.
load
It used to be the small component of a RAID was the disk. Why not make the small component of a RAID a server? And this is how you can get petabytes of storage out of commodity systems.
How do you do that?
Hmm?
How do you do that?
You literally create a network block, DRDB or whatever, a network block device.
Okay.
And so you set up a localized RAID, or don't, but you set up a localized RAID and you basically export that as a storage source, as a block device, and then at a head node, which maybe has no storage, you just say, hey, here's 3 block devices, direct connect, Ethernet, however you want to do it. And then,
Well, you'd still have a controller node. I mean, you could do that with iSCSI if you wanted to.
yeah, what I'm saying is have a diskless controller node.
Yeah, yeah.
Tons of RAM, tons of CPU, and just say, hey, here's your 3 storage devices. They just happen to be over here.
That's what a lot of vendors like SourceFire are doing.
Validate. During recoveries, validating SSL, validating SOAP and REST APIs continue to work. Message queues continue to work. This is an interesting topic of you do your recovery, but for some reason the SSL cert was hard linked or something stupider. And you go to your recovery, you need to have some validation steps in your Go book to validate that the SSL cert works. It works with the new IP. Maybe the SSL cert was assigned to an IP, and during your recovery process, you gave it a different one. SOAP and REST APIs, which may rely on SSL, but they're very kind of hard for users to test. So maybe you need a couple of curl statements to go ahead and test them. And message queue, the exact same thing. So, and always cross-train your peers. So you can go on vacation and stay on vacation. So that's all I got. We're going to get Ken set up. And I think
Andrew?
yes.
One suggestion too, is get an idea of how long your backups should take.
How long they should take?
Because I hate to admit it, but I had backing up a couple hundred meg of text files, and I kicked it off at night. In the morning, it was still backing up. Oh, well,
Yeah.
no big deal.
So yeah, if your backups take 24 hours, what's the point?
Afternoon, it was still going.
Mhm.
So I started looking, and somewhere down in the tree, I had a copy of a temp file
Mhm.
that had several hundred gig
Yeah.
of garbage in it.
Mhm.
That could have run forever.
So
Because I was backing up some, I didn't want it, but I didn't know I was backing it
That's
up.
a great thing. And so whenever you're doing your storyboard and everybody in the room's laughing along with you as you draw flames and stuff, why don't you draw somebody creating a cyclical link in your file system?
Mhm.
Somebody writing a program that's writing ones to a temp file for a week. You know, do those creative stories and think about the worst, silliest things you can, because that's what's going to help you fix it. So you can write things that don't follow links more than twice or something. So this is all stuff that you can do during your storyboard. I'm going to give it up to Ken unless you guys need anything else, and we can do Q&A later.
All right, so what I'm going to do is talk about a particular product and the way that I've used that product to meet at least some of the backup needs for a customer of mine. One of the things that you're going to see pretty quickly is that the stuff that I'm talking about deals pretty much entirely with retention. That doesn't necessarily mean that there might not be some applications for Bacula in migration, but certainly the issue of continuity, isn't really something that comes up here. So, Bacula is an open source project. You can find out about it at bacula.org. And they used to have the tagline, I don't know if they use it anymore. It comes in the night and sucks the essence from your computers. So here's our one-sentence summary, and I usually work on these a fair amount because it helps me be sure that I am going down the right path for the rest of the presentation. Bacula is a networked client-server backup solution that creates cataloged backups of Unix, Linux, Windows, and Mac OS systems on a wide variety of media. And we can look at some of the parts there. It's a network client-server solution. So, although I don't do it this way, if you're using Bacula in a medium to large environment, you can put the different pieces of Bacula on different systems where each one of those systems is doing the things that it does best. It creates catalog backups. You can find out where to retrieve files without reading the media that those files are on. And it supports many different operating systems. And it supports many devices for writing the backups to. I've used Bacula for more than 6 years on a server that belongs to one of my clients. The server runs Debian. This has been going on over 2 generations of server hardware and 2 generations of LTO tape drives. We started on LTO2 and went to LTO4, which is what we're using now. And I work as an independent consultant. So acknowledgements, which, hopefully will slow someone down slightly if they decide to sue me. Bacula is a registered trademark. Excerpts from Bacula documentation are used under the share alike license, and excerpts from the source code are used under the FRO GNU General Public License version 3. Ouch. So this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about some of the basic attributes and structure of Bacula. We'll talk about how I use Bacula, and at that point we'll get into some more detail with concrete examples. We'll talk a little bit about how you can use Bacula, and I'll give you some pointers on where you can go next if you want more information. So these are the 6 components of Bacula. There's the catalog. The catalog is the place where Bacula keeps track of the files and the file systems that it's backed up, the media that it's backed them up onto. That catalog is a relational database. The client file daemon runs on the system that you're backing up. That's the piece that reads the files, that reads the file systems that you want to have saved away somewhere. The console runs on the system where you want it to. The console is the user interface. There's a command line user interface, which is the one that I usually use. There are also 1 or more GUI interfaces. I haven't used them, but presumably you could use those if you wanted.
They're nice.
Okay. The command line's always used what I needed it to, done what I needed it to,
Yeah.
so I stopped there. Got other things to do. The director daemon is the piece of software which is in charge of this all, and you'd put that where it was convenient for you to do so. The storage daemon runs typically where your storage device is attached. Or if you have many storage devices on many different storage servers, it runs on each of them. And the configuration files live on all of those systems. That is the appropriate configuration file for each one of those pieces, each one of those daemons or the console. In my case, they all live on one system because I'm working with what's probably the simplest case. A single system with a directly attached tape drive, and I run the console on that system. So here's a picture of the pieces and how they fit together. And let's see. Well, with the right glasses, it's not completely impossible to read. But you've got the console, and it talks to the director. You've got the file daemon, it talks to the storage daemon, and it talks to the director. The storage daemon talks to the file daemon and the director. The catalog talks to the director, and the storage daemon writes to the physical media. With the exception of the connection between the storage daemon and the physical media, all of the rest of those things are TCP/IP connections. So those can be as close or as far away as they need to be in order to meet your requirements. All right. The catalog in a little more detail. The catalog keeps a record of the files and the file systems that you're going to back up, or that you have backed up. It also keeps a record of media usage. This is valuable for a couple of reasons. If you'd like to rotate through your different media, then Bacula knows which is the next one in the rotation to use. If you'd like to use a particular piece of media only so many times, Bacula keeps track of how many times it has been used. The LTO tapes that we use have a long lifetime, but it is finite. And Bacula lets me keep track of how many passes those have had and boot them out when it's time. The catalog is implemented as a relational database. You can use MySQL, Postgres, or SQLite. You get to pick. In my particular case, SQLite probably would have been fine, but I chose MySQL because we were already using MySQL for some other stuff, and I had a tiny bit more familiarity with it. You know, pick the one that's appropriate for your situation. The client file daemon runs on the system whose files you are backing up. It's got its own configuration file. And that configuration file contains the things that the client file daemon needs to know. Its own name, the encryption keys, where it talks securely to the director daemon, and where to send messages when something out of the ordinary happens.
The question I had about the database
Yes,
is,
sir.
do you get in a loop if you try to use Bacula to back up the database that's storing what the Bacula is doing?
No, because
I don't. The way that I typically handle that is that the database is excluded from the first backup save set, and then I run a job which does an export of the contents of the database
To a file set, which is then included in the next backup.
and then the next backup job, which runs immediately after there's the first backup job, which is backing up all the files I care about, almost, or we'll hope all of them.
Mm-hmm.
The next backup job is doing an export from the database into a .SQL file. Well, it gets encrypted, or it gets zipped up, but a .SQL file. So that gives us a clean export from the database. There's no race conditions going on there. And then that file gets backed up in my next backup operation, which happens immediately. That's when I say next, I don't mean the next night. I mean right now, right away, and goes on the same tape. So at that point, I've got a catalog that contains the contents that's on that tape, plus of course the contents of the tape. So from there, I can get back.
All right, but I'll just put a bookmark in here that some other discussion needs to take place. You're talking about backing up files. We need to talk about backing up databases in some
talk
other
about that.
venue. Continue with your presentation.
So if the catalog's on the tape, how can you find out where on the tape the catalog is to recover?
Well,
it actually.
There's a couple of issues there. If I lose the on-disk catalog, then that's what you might refer to as my disaster recovery situation. And at that point, I have to go read the manual and figure out how to do that, how you get that done. I have needed to restore the home file system, which in this particular case contains from my perspective, the largest version repository, which is sort of, the crown jewels that's what's on the server. That's not exactly a database, but I don't back that up, as is either, and we'll talk about that too. So, you can get there. The console is the human interface. As I mentioned, there's a command line console. I found that adequate. That's been enough for me to do the occasional restore of a file, a few files, the contents of a directory, because somebody inadvertently deleted something that they, had not to of. And it's also been sufficient for me to, in the one time when I needed to, restore an entire disk drive, because the disk drive, the home file system, is not good to dust. And that's, that's pretty much all the stuff. That's, most of what I care about. And that was fun. But there are GUI consoles available. It's got a configuration file. It's on a Linux system. It was lived/exe/Dracula. And you're starting to see a pattern here. It needs to know its own name, and it needs how to talk to the director. I did say that the director was in charge of everything. The director daemon. Oh, these are in alphabetical order, by the way. The director daemon runs the show. So naturally, it's the hardest one to configure because it needs to know everything. It's got the largest and most complicated configuration file, which is also found in /etc/Dracula. The storage daemon. Storage daemon works with storage media. In my case, that's magnetic tape. Similar case, it needs to know how to talk to the director, what to do with messages, and what or how is the actual medium, what is the storage media. So those are the different pieces. I'm going to talk a little bit more about configuring the director because that's the complicated part.
Going back to the storage media for a moment, if I'm not mistaken, because I'm seeing this, I worked with a system called NetBackup, and it looks like it's configured the same way. If you have multiple storage medias, the director can actually can work in parallel and say, I want this storage media to be backing up this file set while I want this other storage media to be backing up this other file set. So
certainly,
you get a lot of, you're working with that simple case where it's just one machine doing one machine, whatever.
I'm working with the simplest case, but
this is very extensible.
But this is extremely extensible. Yes. There's no reason why, there's no reason why you couldn't have, several servers, each one of which has several tape drives attached, and they are doing, say, 3 drives on each system. You could be running 6 different backup streams. Because you may recall that back when we were looking at the connections between the different components, the data to be backed up does move directly from the client daemon to the storage daemon. It doesn't pass back up to the director.
Right.
All right, so to configure the director, these are the primary entities. A job is sort of the unit of action. If any of you, some of you probably remember batch jobs. A few of you have more gray hair than I do. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit like that. Jobs come in 3 flavors. There's backup jobs, store data, on a storage medium. There's restore jobs, they bring data back. And there's admin jobs, which typically just run a shell script that you need to get, that does something you need to get done either before or after a backup job. Right. So backup jobs reference file sets, and they reference schedules.
Let me insert that those script jobs are sometimes preparatory and cleanup. You're going to back up something, you may need to quiesce it. And so the preparatory script may be to quiesce whatever you're about to back up, and then the cleanup script reactivates whatever you're about to back up. I mean, that's why those command line jobs exist in that scheme.
But you'll see that in my more specific examples as we get further along. That's all right. That's all right. You're just confirming that what I'm talking about is a real thing. Let's see. File sets. File sets are definitions of the files you want to back up. They can include, like, this is the list of things I want, and they also have a provision for you to say, except I don't want this stuff. So you've got include lists and exclude lists. Schedules determine when jobs are run and which pool to use. So, for example, if you want to run essentially the same operation, which is to do your nightly backup, but once a month it's going to go on the media that gets shipped across the country, and once a month it's going to go on the media that gets retained for 12 months, your schedule handles that for you, because you just tell the schedule that, on the first Wednesday of the month, I use the offsite pool. On the second Wednesday of the month, I use the monthly pool. Right? Messages is where messages get sent. Typically that's email. I get a set of, they happen every time, and they're just confirming successful operation messages. And those get filtered off into a folder where I generally don't look at them unless something interesting occurs. And I get some other email messages when something bad has happened. Those don't get filtered. Those typically come when the person that I asked to change the tape when I wasn't there failed to do so. It's not a disaster. We get it taken care of. But that lets me know that, oops, didn't happen. Got to go deal with it. All right, so now we're going to start into the more specific information about how I use Bacula. We'll talk about why I chose Bacula, admin jobs, ways that I use them, backup jobs, restore jobs, and some hints and tricks. So here's the timeline of how things work for backups at this customer's site. There were no backups. And then I started doing some work for them. And then we started doing backups of their little bitty server machine. And we wrote them onto a CD. And that was great. It could hold almost 700 megabytes. I mean, that's huge. Or at least at the time, it seemed like huge.
That was 20 years ago, maybe.
And it wasn't that long ago.
But it was bigger than zero, which is what they were doing before you arrived.
But it was bigger than zero, and it was actually big enough to hold the data of real critical interest that was on that server at that time. And then we switched to DVDs, and that's, 7 or so times larger. And then we switched to DVD-DLs, and that's not quite twice as big. And we could then see that, that's not going to be big enough either, so now what? All right? So that was the point when I started looking at, what are we going to do? What the mechanism we had been using, which was essentially, cron jobs, Perl, tar, and, whatever that strange program was for writing DVDs back in 2005 or so. That wasn't going to do it anymore. So, I had a requirement for off-site and offline backup. There's probably some amount of personal taste here, but off-site is important because one of the things that I need to protect against is the possibility of the building burning down. And although eventually they did acquire one of those, fire-resistant file cabinets, you just never know. So off-site's a requirement, and I needed to be able, so I needed a piece of media that I could ship somewhere. And tapes are comparatively rugged and fairly dense. I had a requirement for the ability to do full backups every time. And the reason for that is to simplify restores. From my perspective, one of the things that's important in this particular environment is the restore can't be too complicated. Well, you only need this one piece of media to restore all of the company data.
And a drive.
Well, you need a drive, you need a server, and all that stuff. But in terms of just this one, you don't need this one, which is the last full dump, and these two, which were the last weekly dumps, and these three, which were the last daily dumps, and my God, what were people thinking?
So your spare tape drive stored in that bank vault somewhere?
No. But it's an LTO series drive. There are lots and lots and lots of those.
What do you get on the tape nowadays? What do you get on the tape nowadays?
Oh, we have an LTO4 drive. It has a capacity of 800 gigabytes. There are LTO6 drives available, 2 generations beyond where we are now. Those newer drives have backward read compatibility. I'm actually not too worried.
But the new drives have what density?
Every day.
The LTO6 has something like essentially 3 terabytes.
Very reasonable.
I mean,
What is LTO? I've worked them, but I can't remember what LTO. Linear tape?
linear something, I don't care.
Something big.
Used to be called TK50s.
There you go.
That's our 50 meg, right?
That was pretty big then.
Right. So, offsite backups protect against disasters like the building burning down. Offline backups, from my point of view, provide a certain protection against malicious intruders. Online backups, it's probably pretty difficult to provide that. After all, if the system that you're backing up has automatic access to something, are you going to keep someone who gets access to that system from getting access to that? I'm not saying it can't be done. And there is, of course, the possibility, that the Good Times virus will come along and erase all of my tapes. But anyone here remember the Good Times virus? That was too long ago.
Wow. I think you're dating yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Moving right along. So Bacula was more complex and more capable than any backup tool I've used previously. There was a bit of a learning curve. It is built to be able to handle a much more complex environment than the one I'm using. But once I had it up and running, it pretty much just worked. So I started using Bacula 2.x something, because that was the release that was currently distributed with the version of Debian that I was using at the time. I'm several versions of Debian later, and now it's 5.x. Also, I've made one tape, there's been one system hardware replacement. And with that system hardware replacement, we went from LTO2 to LTO4 tape drives. So, jobs. So jobs run according to schedules. And we'll talk about schedules a little bit more. jobs can have run before and run after scripts as part of the job. Now, I chose to use the run before script on each one of my jobs to check to see if it's a holiday. My holiday schedule at this site is quite variable. You know, from one year to the next, they will choose different times of the year when they actually decide to have their days off. And when there's a days off, you know, a day off, it means that there's nobody there to change tapes. So it's important to know, hey, if this is a holiday, or more importantly,
The day after a holiday?
if this is the day after a holiday, I don't need to run because there wasn't anybody there to change the tape. Jobs.
Is the library on the shopping list?
No. This customer is, no.
Okay.
I
They're
got
getting-
them,
they're
I've
getting
gotten them, you know, I've gotten them this far,
Mhm.
but
Kicking and screaming?
That's the
it
other
wasn't
state
there.
library.
Let's put it this way.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
There's a bank a few blocks away. My idea was that we should get a safety deposit box there, so someone could just like walk over and drop it in.
That costs money.
Yeah, that's right.
I won't, go ahead, I'm sorry I distracted you.
So, all right, jobs that are run at the same time run in priority order. As it happens, lower numbers run first. So if you have a series of jobs that you want to run, you'd set them all up to run at the same time, you'd give them different priorities, and they would run according to those priorities. And my holidays are run, the holiday stuff gets handled via a Python script. There's some software called period.py out of the University of Madison. And then I, wrote a little Python script around that. So the admin jobs execute a shell script which does stuff like this. Mount or dismount devices or media, extract database contents, clean up after backup. For example, when MySQL files get extracted to .SQL file that gets gzipped, and then that file gets backed up.
The shell script lives on the same machine as where the data lives. It's not pushed out by the director.
See, you've correctly identified the case of the simplification of what I'm doing. All right? For me, they're all the same system, and I didn't have to worry about that issue. Somebody who's going to do this in a more complex environment is going to have to think about that stuff. I didn't have to. I'm pretty sure you can work out how to do it. Likewise, that after those things get extracted and backed up, afterwards they get deleted. That's the cleanup operation. Another thing that happens is, I mentioned there's this big, from my point of view at least, this large subversion repository. The way that we handle that is that we use svn-admin dump to dump the repository, back up the dump. But because the repository is large and doing the dump actually takes a fair amount of time, I cache those dump files. And I only dump the last, 5,000 transactions or so. Because that's where, I dump. So for example, I cache the dump file of the first 5,000, and from 5,000 to 10,000, and 10 to 15, and 15 to 20. I cache all those dump files, and then on a nightly basis, what I do is dump from, say, 35,000 on. That file gets updated. And we back those up. And, So, backup jobs. we run 2 backup jobs each night, once for the data and once for the catalog. We talked about that a little bit. We do them 5 times a week because that's how often there are typically people there to change tapes. We use 4 pools of tapes. There are 10 tapes in a daily pool, and we just rotate through those. There are 12 tapes in a monthly pool. We use one of those once a month. That, so those go up to a year. There's likewise 12 off-site tapes once a month. I mail a tape off-site. And then there's a yearly pool. Once a year, we take it back up and put it in the file cabinet and leave it there. So this scheme gives us some amount of ability to go back in time and delete something that somebody deleted a long time ago, relatively. If it was in the last 2 weeks, it's going to be on those recent tapes. We're pretty sure to have it. If it was further back than that, there's a fair chance that we'll have it. If it's more than a year ago, there's some chance that we'll have it. I've never had to go to the monthly or the yearly tapes to retrieve anything. That doesn't mean it can't happen, but in this environment, I've never had to do it. Stan.
We had to go back 2 years once. I don't remember what it was, but we went back 2 years on our backup tapes. Some system problem with that. And the only way we could find and restore was some tape 2 years ago.
Right. Was that because none of your recent ones were usable, or?
I don't remember what the situation was, but we did have to go back 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, and I've already talked about the fact that I cached the Subversion repository extracts. If you were backing up more than one system, you would probably handle the catalog backups differently than the way that I do. Again, because my assumption is the changes to my catalog happen during my nightly backup. After that, I can extract its contents and back those up.
On your pool where you say 10 daily, that essentially is 2 full weeks.
That's 2 full weeks.
Business days.
Right. And, during the beginning of the month, it's a little more than that because it turns out that the offsite backup runs on the first Wednesday, and the monthly backup runs on the second Wednesday, and the yearly backup runs on the third Wednesday of March. So in March, it's, could be as long as 13 business days.
So the off-sites are actually then a separate backup job that you run.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes and no. It's the same backup job in the sense of what files I'm backing up and when the link it's run and all of that. It's just that on the first Tuesday of the month, it uses a tape from a different pool. That's part of the schedule. And we'll see that. We'll see that in the schedule definition shortly.
So there is
So
no monthly tape made then? No.
yeah, there's an off-site tape that's made first Wednesday, 2 a.m. in the morning. Monthly tape that's made second Wednesday, 2 a.m. in the morning.
Okay.
So there's a possibility that should something occur such that I need what would have been the daily backup on the day the offsite tape was made, I might have to have it shipped back. Hasn't happened yet. I'm willing to deal with that if it does. There are There are a lot of decisions here that someone in a different situation might make differently, and I recognize that.
If you have a file that got deleted 2 months ago that you need to restore, in order to, based on tape backup drives like you're doing, you have to restore that entire image to get that one file? How do you do that?
Just cherry pick.
No, I asked for that file. We'll get to that. I'm going to talk a little bit about restoring a single file or a few files. The first thing is I basically is to ask the catalog, you know, what tape is this?
Wait, so which days were this? What days was this file backed up?
What tapes is it on?
And it'll tell you what tapes it's on. What days was this file backed up? And then it'll tell you what tapes it's on, and you'll make a decision.
And then I go fetch the appropriate tape. Or if I have to, you know, ask for it to be shipped back. So hopefully this is semi-readable at the back of the room.
Yeah, I just was at the eye doctor yesterday.
Great. So this is what a job definition looks like. The job itself gets a name. It references a file set, which is the definition of the files that it's going to back up. There's a priority assigned to it. There's the job that runs before. There's a script that runs before the job. There's a script that runs after the job. There's the kind of job it is, the schedule it runs on, the client, where the files are coming from, they're being backed up, and where they're going to. There's, you know, been a little bit of simplification here, but you know, these are the essentials. So this is the main backup job that, you know, gets the files that we're interested in and gets them onto a tape. Here's a somewhat simplified view of its file set. We at home, you might want to get some other things. We actually do. Other things you might want to get are root, etc, var_lib, user local, /opt, database extracts, and of course you're probably going to have some excludes. So for example, I exclude the directories where the Subversion repositories sit because I'm getting that data other ways. I exclude the directories where the SQL databases are because I'm getting that data in other ways.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think the underlying guts is that it uses the find command, the Unix find command, to process that list, and then, you know, pipes the output of that find command to a CPIO or a UCD or
no, absolutely not.
No?
No.
Okay.
No.
Forget about how the guts work.
It's doing it itself. So this is what a schedule looks like. So it's got a name, and then it's got, you know, run commands. So using the pool yearly in March on the 3rd Wednesday at 2 a.m. Using the pool monthly on the 2nd Wednesday at 2 a.m. Off-site, 1st Wednesday, 2 a.m. Daily, Tuesday at 2 a.m. And there's more. Daily, Thursday through Saturday at 2 a.m. Monthly 4th Wednesday, monthly 5th Wednesday. You know, I'm picking up the holes, right? See how this is working?
In other words, it doesn't run the dailies, a real daily on the Tuesdays.
It doesn't
On
use
the
the daily,
Wednesdays.
it doesn't use the daily pool.
Right.
It uses a different pool of tapes. Running the same job, just using a different set of tapes. And then, you know, remember that 3rd Wednesday in March we're doing something special, so we've got to fix that up. January, February, 3rd Wednesday, April through December, 3rd Wednesday, we do dailies. So that covers all the days, Tuesday through Saturday at 2 a.m. And remember, we're handling holidays separately because from my perspective, the contents of this configuration file change comparatively slowly. I don't need to change them very often. My holidays change once a year at least, neglecting the times when they decide, oh, we've got this important thing happening on that day when we were going to have a holiday, so we're going to move that day. So I'm just made a decision, and again, I recognize this is a matter somewhat of taste, to concentrate that rapidly changing stuff somewhere else. So these are the jobs that get run on those 5 nights a week. First job mounts the tape. Next job extracts special data. The third job does backup and cleanup. Fourth job extracts the catalog. The fifth job does backup and cleanup. And the sixth job unmounts the tape. They're all scheduled to run at the same time. They're all assigned different priorities. So mounting the tape would be 10, and extracting the data would be 12, and backing up and cleanup would be 14. So they always run in that order. To do a restore, it turns out that there has to be a restore job in the configuration. And there's only one. It has some of the stuff filled in, and the rest of it, it's kind of a fill in the blanks kind of thing, which I do using the, the command line console. Starts out, you select a job ID via a menu of options for the different ways you can select the job ID. That's job ID corresponds to which tape you used, where the file is you want to get back. You select the files you want to restore. It typically takes me about 5 minutes to define the restore. And that deals with the 2 cases that I've had to deal with, which was I want a few files off some tape that somebody deleted, or I need to throw the whole thing back. Either way, it's been pretty fast. Restores should be easy. When you're doing restores, especially if it's in a disaster recovery situation, you will not have had enough sleep. There will be people jumping up and down. Restores need to be easy. You can probably find a number
Is there
of
an option to restore it in place and to restore it off to the side?
Mm-hmm. I've always, with the exception of restoring the entire thing, I've always restored off to the side.
Yep. Go
on. A number of you will probably be able to find a variety of faults in the way that this arrangement has been done, but by God, restores are easy, and that was really important to me, because a lot of the times when you need to do a restore, it's not going to be good.
One of the other problems with restore is because it wants to restore in place or off to the side and stuff like that, you can run into trouble if you're in an enterprise environment and it's 2 years ago and the host name that you're trying to restore doesn't exist anymore. So you have to do some configuring to say, it used to be on this host, but now I want it restored to this other host instead. It's just an admin.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some issues there. Again, we're on this simplest case.
Yeah, not in the simple case, right?
I typically need to do restores about twice a year. My user community is fairly small, and most of them are not particularly stupid. And the number of times when I need to do a restore because somebody lost something is very small. I keep a simple, how-to file that's kind of customized for my configuration in /etc/backup. I go refresh my memory. Oh yeah, that's how I do it. Like I say, the whole thing, the setting up, including looking at that, typically takes about 5 minutes. It may take a little bit longer to spool through the tape and get the files, but not enough time that anyone cares. So when you're going to restore files, the way that it works is it says, okay, I've picked the job that I'm going to restore from, or a job I'm going to restore from. Now you need to pick the files. And this is the kind of commands that are available for you to do that. It's kind of like, your directory manipulation commands when you're working with the shell. You can CD down into directories or back up, into the saved, basically you're sort of working with, the database of the saved file systems. You can use find, you can use list, you can show your current working directory. Wildcards work. You mark when you find the stuff you want to get restored.
Is this looking at the catalog? These commands?
Yeah, after you have selected a job, you're basically working with the catalog. And
These are the commands you use.
And these are the commands. They're actually, additional commands, but this gives you the flavor. For example, just so there's a mark, there is an unmarked. Okay.
So basically, you're doing this find on a command line, and it's scrolling up a list of files with backup dates and stuff like that. Is that the idea?
Actually, just lists the files, typically, and you say, that's the directory I want, or that's the file I want. You type mark, directory name, which is where it curses down, or file name with wildcards, whatever. You select the cards, the files you want. When you're done, you type done, and it says, Mother, may I? And if you say yes, boom, the files come back. So here's some hints and some tricks. When you're setting up stuff like during configuration files, beware of reusing names in different categories. Some of those namespaces are different and some of them aren't. This hit me the first time I set this up. There are a bunch of things where I thought, these are like the names of different kinds of things. So I'll just use this same name everywhere because I know that the name over here has to match the name over here, and I'll just use the same name everywhere. They'll all match. No, it turns out that doesn't actually work. So use different names. You might even prefix them with a little something to tell you what they're the name of, like FD if it's a file daemon, or SD if it's a storage daemon, or whatever. So that was something I ran into. I found it useful to have a schedule for jobs, which could make a job run basically on indefinite hold. So that I wanted to queue a job up and have it sit there for a while, and because I wanted to check on something or before I released it. I set up a schedule for a job to run on February 31st. Never run. I left a gap in job priorities so that if for some reason I ever needed to slip something in later to deal with a special situation, I could do that pretty easily. And we've already talked about caching and subversion dump files.
This idea of job priorities, why? I'm not having a good grip on that. Why would you be running multiple priority jobs?
Typically what happens is that in order to get a backup done, you need more than just one job, you need a bunch of jobs, as you saw in the previous example. You don't know how long it's going to take each one of those jobs to run. The way that Bacula has of dealing with that is that you schedule them all to run at the same time, but you assign them different priorities. And Bacula will then order them for that priority. It's a mechanism for ordering. So,
So it's like the order of files in an init.
So
In an enterprise environment, you also want the backups to stop at 6 o'clock in the morning instead of tying up the machine. And the priorities that don't get done before 6 o'clock don't get done that night.
Yeah,
Then you've got to come in at 7 and decide whether you want to kick them off and run them manually and aggravate your users, or no, that can wait till tomorrow night.
yeah,
It's a weighting system that applies weight to.
right. So You know, like I say, that's the mechanism for me that gets things to happen the right way.
Yeah, it could be, you could prioritize because your tape might fill up, you could prioritize because things might not get done tonight, and you have to get pushed off till the next night. There's different reasons to prioritize it, it just allows you to, now we're into, into like, customizing for your environment, but the ability to prioritize jobs exists in the tool.
All right, so how can you use Bacula? Well, in other ways than I have. As we've emphasized, it has the ability to be used on a much larger scale than what I'm doing. So you could back up more than one system. You could have multiple file daemons. Each one would have its own Bacula. Some of those could be Windows systems. I haven't done that, but I know that the file daemon exists, and you can do it. You would handle the catalog differently in that case. You might handle tools differently in that case. You know, my system of pools is really pretty straightforward. I'm backing up this one system. If I were backing up a bunch of systems, I might decide to have them, those backups use different pools. You can back up different kinds of systems. I back up one Linux server, but you can back up Windows systems, you can back up OS, you can back up Solaris, you can back up BSD.
Are there any fancy tools for Windows? Like I know there's a notorious problem with backing up open files and stuff like that.
Shadow copy.
Shadow copy. What about databases, Exchange servers, stuff like
So
that?
most databases have a plugin in Bacula, and it'll just do a lock on the table and then pull it down.
Okay.
The problem is that if you do that, you have to give it the right privileges so that it can pull the index for the database. So in MySQL, the MySQL table, for example. So but you do give it a separate user read-only.
You know, I'm thinking like an Exchange server is notorious for pulling a good backup. For not being able to pull
Exchange actually has its own export function, and it's very poorly documented.
Of course.
So you could get an LTO6 changer and back up 3 terabytes per cartridge. You know, really good at town.
What kind of speed though?
Oh, it's pretty fast. It'll saturate your bus. It's pretty good. Actually, that should be a good t-shirt idea. It'll saturate your bus.
So, for those of you that are familiar with this book, the Unix System Administration Handbook by Nemeth et al., in the 4th edition, Bacula has become their preferred tool.
I brought the O'Reilly Backup and Recovery book. Second time I brought it to this meeting because it's the funniest book out there. There's the funny stories about how people lost their job because they did something wrong.
So, other resources. The documentation for Bacula is really quite good and very extensive. It was one of the reasons that I chose it. You know, there was a lot of stuff to learn, but by golly, you could go read about all of it. There's a Bacula wiki, there's a Bacula bug list, there's a Bacula mailing list, which I haven't used lately, but which in the past was reasonably helpful. And then there's, you know, Chapter 10, Section 8 in here is actually a very nice introduction. Other questions?
Is that the gal that's lost at sea?
Yes. Yes.
Ever find her?
No.
I think we've got some talking points. You got anything else you want to touch on?
No, we have talking points.
So I've actually used Bacula in some pretty big enterprises, so I can cover some of these things. Databases, I think we just touched on that. Bacula has plugins for most major databases, and it will actually connect as a user Bacula, user whatever, its own credentials. It may have read-only rights to read, but it'll just do a database lock. So in MySQL, you can lock the tables. You can tell it not to stop all transactions. I'm the guy at the moment. You can actually do this. So most every database, you can just basically tell it, hey, stop accepting writes until my dump is done. So you don't even need to actually run that as a separate cron. Bacula does that now. Tape indexes. There's actually a pseudo copy of the catalog in the tape index itself, and there's bextract and BLS, which will actually allow you to recreate the catalog from a tape, which is a good and a bad thing. But if you enable some of the encryption stuff or the TLS or the keys, you can actually protect people from taking that tape home and running bextract. So recovering a tape, pretend your entire infrastructure is gone and you have a tape. You want to recover it easy, but you actually don't want to recover it easy because you want it to. So if somebody took it home, they couldn't do bextract and get everything off that tape. So this is the encryption part. So maybe you have your keys saved somewhere, burnt on a CD, off-site, maybe, that kind of stuff. But yeah, on-tape indexes are a bad thing or a good thing, depending on how your security is. Libraries, tape libraries, DVD libraries, Blu-ray libraries, which are awesome. Basic rack mount systems, you can load it up with Blu-ray things, robot will grab it, burn 50 gig, and you have an immutable copy. Tape drive libraries, some of the new stuff is just awesome. It's like 2 rack cabinets rolling into the data center, and Bob's your uncle, you can have 1,000 tapes in there. It'll just come in and grab them. Obviously, it won't ship them off-site for you, but it'll do almost everything else.
Maybe we can figure that one out.
Huh?
Maybe we can figure that out.
If you put the FedEx envelope under the slot, it'll probably drop on that.
Yeah, but whenever FedEx brings that box back, it can't quite unpackage it right. Those peanuts really screw up the robot.
When I worked at the Military Records Center, they had a robot system, big cages for storing microfilm records, and they were losing a lot of records, and eventually the guy in charge decided to program it to pull out everything that wasn't in there, and it started dumping out hundreds of these microfilms. The index had lost them. Mm-hmm. It crashed, the index was screwed up.
Yeah, so most of the systems now, instead of trying to memorize where everything is, they just have a barcode reader on the front of it. If there's something there, it reads it. In that way, you're not trying to memorize what's in that slot. It just goes there and it kind of reindexes itself with saying, hey, there's a barcode in that barcode, and they write it in. So basically, once you zero yourself and you start getting it back through the catalog, so yeah, libraries are very awesome. They're not always free or cheap, but what they do is they keep that human element of, oh, they forgot to change the tape. They keep that from happening. And I think what he's touching on is that ruins his backup schedule.
Yeah. And there was always the instance of the person that always backs up to the same tape.
No, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, but no,
I've had it happen.
No, but I mean, that, for me, that won't happen.
Yeah. So to touch on that topic, Bacula has a media manager capability where it can have each tape has an ID now, which is awesome. So like you buy these LT tapes, they actually have an ID embedded on them, and they can read it. It's like a little CMOS chip on the thing. Yeah. And it can literally be told to only write if this ID is in the slot. So you can actually keep it from writing unless it has the right tape.
My approach is less sophisticated, but for example, in the daily rotation, the tape, it has to be at least 10 days since the tape was written before it can be written again.
Right, so what I'm saying is your pools can pull one tape with a specific ID and it has to match. It's actually a really cool thing. It's really useful with the libraries, maybe not so useful for you.
Right.
So the client file scripts, so the client file engine, the thing that like lives on your workstation or on the server, it can actually pre and post run scripts that the director can tell it to do. So it can actually read from a queue of, oh, run your pre-scripts, run your post-scripts. So the client file question, I think somebody brought it up about, whether they're all ran from the director or not. No, it's the client file. So if you have a Microsoft Windows system, it has a different way of running scripts than your Linux server. So it's all part of the client file system. Client file indexing and shadow copy. So for Linux and some other systems, you can actually do inode tracking. It tracks the inodes for differences. So it's not about using find, dumping, and indexing. It's more about asking the file system what inodes have changed. And some people, you could do some really cool things with that, but on Windows it's called shadow copy. And that shadow copy is basically telling the kernel that, hey, I need a copy of this, leave it in memory for me for a moment, I'm going to get a copy. So, did anyone else have any other things about Bacula? It's completely awesome. You can actually run multiple directors if you want to get crazy. But the consoles, there's web-based, there's GTK, there's all kinds of consoles. And I think the worst thing I've ever seen with Bacula was a console where an end user would restore files in place over top of the new version. So they would want to go, they would be working on some file or some graphics thing. Actually, it was a graphics, so it was like a book layout. And they would have everything they did for the last week in their book layout, and then they would think they would need something from 2 weeks ago. They'd go grab the 2 weeks ago and overwrite everything they did that day, just because the console was too easy to use. So sometimes command line is best if your users are users. I think it's pizza time.
We go to Nick
I think this one's open source. I mean, I can just think of all kinds of ways to bastardize this and use it for other things as a distributed cron job.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't have to be
You stop by
take.
and have a iced tea
That's
or
for
beer or
you
whatever,
for real purposes.
whatever you
So
choose.
Saltstack, Ansible, or some other, I think old people would use Puppet, I think is the old legacy tool. So,
Oh, it's still kind of mainstream.
no.
No.
Okay. So thank you very much, Super Ken. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Ken didn't get one last time, but I brought him one this time. He gets a penguin.
I just don't know what to say.
You don't know what to say?
When did Tux go to his summer uniform? Or was that the winter uniform?
Well,
No.
so penguins are